Okay, I think we'll make a start. Well, first of all, good morning. Wishing you a very warm welcome to this webinar this morning on Unified Identity Protection. This has been delivered by us here at ITC Secure with our partners at Silverfort. My name is Mandeep Gosal. I'm the Director of Professional Services at ITC. We are a Microsoft partner and we provide professional and managed security services to a number of customers, both within the UK, EMEA, and worldwide. And we have been working in conjunction with our partners at Silverfort on some extended MFA solutions, which has really been augmenting our MXDR and identity offerings. So we'd like to spend some time this morning with you discussing zero trust implementation and also why we truly believe that MFA is a fundamental part in terms of MFA coverage as part of your zero trust strategy, whether you've started that journey or whether you're thinking about taking the leap. So I'll just hand over to my colleague Jonathan at Silverfort to introduce himself.
Thanks, Mandeep. Hello, everyone. Appreciate your time for joining us to talk about unified identity protection and zero trust with our amazing partners at ITC. So my name is Jonathan Nativ, and I manage our strategic alliances here at Silverfort. So looking forward to speaking with you today and answering any questions that you may have.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan. I think what we'll start to do, folks, is with a poll question. So tried and tested tradition, always start with a question in the web poll, just to sort of check have a little bit of a temperature check on where you may be with your zero trust journey. So Safar, I don't know if we can pop the question up into the chat. Thank you very much. So really the question is, where are you on your zero trust journey? Have you started your journey? And if so, how far along are you? What we'd like to do is just give you about 20 to 30 seconds to consider your response, and hopefully you can share your insights with us.
Interesting results so far, I have to say, Mandeep.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. We've got a strong correlation thus far to having started your journey. So look, I mean, we start by acknowledging that, zero trust as a concept is not a new thing. It's been around for, over a decade, perhaps longer. But I think there've been varying degrees of, I guess, success along implementation and, pitfalls and challenges that come along that. But really, it's a resounding result from those that have shared their insights. We've started, but we need some more help, or potentially haven't started at all. So holding that thought, we will ask another question at the end of the web poll, and hopefully throughout the course of the next 40 to 45 minutes, we can provide some insights as to how you can get started, or maybe re-baseline and educate you really on the solution that Silverfort and ITC are offering together. So thank you for your participation on the first web poll question. Just to now start the first slide, Safar, if we could just get to the first slide, please. Thank you. So I think a good place to start is just to consider, the evolved threat landscape. So we all know that the pandemic changed the game in terms of rapidly expanding the attack surface as businesses underwent accelerated digital transformation. We really saw that with increased insider threats and attacks targeting remote workers. It forced a paradigm shift in assessing where the actual corporate network perimeter now lies. Meanwhile, bad actors were exploiting gaps in security through the lack of endpoint protection with this new hybrid way of working and the need really to secure identities at the new perimeter edge, the so-called new perimeter edge. Edge and IoT platform providers have only recently moved away from, the trust but verify philosophy and have begun instead, designing in technology and solution that treats every endpoint and identity as that new security perimeter. And we only have to remind ourselves of, attacks like the SolarWinds Orion attack, or how important supply chain exposure has proven to be as a significant blind spot, an attack vector for all businesses with fairly devastating impacts. And there's a couple of statistics there we can see from Microsoft and IBM that, are making a very strong case for zero trust adoption. And obviously from our poll question, we can see that a number of you have already started on your journeys, but perhaps thinking, how do you demonstrate the return on value? Am I really protecting, the key assets based on the evolved threat landscape, and what can I do next? to make sure we're getting the biggest bang for buck in terms of stress on budgets and the pressure to do more with less, and so on. So if you just move to the next slide, please, Sophia. I think it's a good juncture to remind ourselves, what is zero trust? We have to remind ourselves that what it is and what it isn't. It's a set of principles. It's an architecture. It's a framework. It isn't a product or a quick fix project, no matter what a vendor might tell you. The key principle is based on trust not being implicit. So this trust has to be earned, authorized, and then monitored continuously. The three core tenets of zero trust, just to remind ourselves, I'm sure most of you are aware, but it's important to cover this. Verify explicitly. So always making security decisions using all of the available data points, including the identities, location of those identities, device health, data classification, and so on. Using least privilege access, so limiting access with just in time and just enough access, risk-based adaptive policies, and really assuming breach, so minimizing the blast radius with microsegmentation, multi-factor authentication, end-to-end encryption, and really that important point around continuous monitoring. Again, this all sounds eminently sensible. I think we acknowledge it's a framework, but it's not always as straightforward to achieve in practice and get started. And if you have got started, to sort of make sure that you are tracking your controls and risk mitigation against your original baseline. So just going to the next slide, please, Sophia. Covering some of the key pitfalls and challenges. Zero trust has traditionally been thought of in the context of a network, with implementation seen as a project focused on upgrading and segmenting legacy infrastructure, typically. So, as long as access to all physical assets was controlled, the thinking went, that could act as a proxy for extending trust to users. But this concept has been proven to be flawed, especially with the traditional perimeter moving and the surge in users accessing resources from outside an organization's network. So really this over-reliance on legacy infrastructure, is a well-recognized barrier to adoption and even ongoing implementation. So really you have to start with your legacy infrastructure rebuilding or replacing, getting the fundamentals in place first, really fully digitally transforming before you take that first step. The reality of zero trust is it's a journey. We've heard this before. It's not a destination. There's no quick fixes. There's a lot of kind of messages, perhaps mixed messages from vendors in the space that, buy our one-time solution and it will fix all of your zero trust problems and you've implemented a project. It's a security methodology. It's designed to be continuously applied throughout the environment to control user access. And I think through key partnerships, like with our partnerships with Silverfort, we can offer very compelling solutions which provide, a very short time to solution and also ability to reduce the attack surface for a zero trust lens. I beg your pardon. So Jonathan will be talking to this in just a few moments with his demonstration. And few businesses at times understand, really truly understand their IT estate and how the various systems and applications interact. So as you implement segregation and your access controls, things start to break, right? So these unexpected dependencies will be discovered, and sometimes you have very surprising data flows and long forgotten applications that can start to give you a bit of a headache. So just moving to the next slide, please, Sophia. So really the big question is, where should you get started? Or if you have started, did we take the right decision and that step and the right decision, and where do we go from here? ITC recognises that each business is unique, as is its context, risk profile, risk appetite, maturity, and so on and so forth. So we really think that a good place to start is with an identity maturity assessment. And what we mean by this is really focusing on the risks, the crown jewels that are relative to your business goals, your business context, your vertical, your priorities, your organizational context. Based on that level of identity maturity and that baseline, using a partner like ITC and Silverfort to develop a very pragmatic zero trust roadmap. And that should be linked to iterative improvements over time, which address key risks, but really focusing, on the fact that, utopia can't be achieved, and we need to break things down into simple iterative steps. And look to simplify, focusing on those quick wins that provide the biggest bang per buck and return, so that when you're having those conversations at the board level, you're able to very, kind of transparently prove the value of the investment and that you've actually made a difference with reducing that attack surface, again, through a zero trust lens. Identifying and mitigating those biggest pain points is key, and taking simple steps, like creating an inventory of assets, implementing MFA coverage and extending that coverage to as wide a part of your estate and your key assets as you possibly can with the resources that you have. So if you just move to the next slide, please, Sophia. ITC can really help you in a number of different means, but really that identity maturity assessment provides a consistent framework of IAM controls to assess and evaluate your organisation, providing a clear and objective view of where you currently stand and creating that tailored roadmap. An identity cleanse, you might see on the slide there, that could be a first step from the maturity assessment or kicked off immediately as one of the very first steps as part of maturity assessment engagement. And what that will do is take your current identity providers and identity sources and evaluate them alongside each other. So providing analysis of the quality of your identity data and its health across your entire organisation. And for example, that could be identifying over-permissioned accounts, potential orphans or other spurious accounts that are often accumulated over the lifetime of many systems. And really then leading into a roadmap planning report and working with you over the course of time in a programmatic way to introduce controls over time that reduce your attack surface, but link that to budget, continuous iterative improvements, and take you on that journey again, recognizing that that destination can't always be achieved overnight, and in fact it is a journey over time. Continuous monitoring with a partner like ITC through our MXDR platform. So once you've identified some of these key controls, then you need that continuous monitoring in place post authentication, post authorization, to ensure new risks aren't being introduced. So just moving to the next slide, please, Sophia. So we're really proud to have partnered with the team at Silverfort. They've provided a very compelling solution around providing MFA coverage across real blind spots. And what we mean by that are things like service accounts or air gap systems, legacy applications. So kind of perhaps some areas in your estate, in your environment, you don't tend to consider as a kind of a key attack vector for bad actors, but we really see some statistics that purport that, to the fact that not having MFA coverage comprehensively provided and not dealing with these service accounts can provide a significant attack surface for those bad actors. ITC has already started working with Silverfort with a number of clients, specifically some London Borough Councils that have been compromised, where we are now starting to roll out through some very quick time to solution proof of concepts, MFA coverage for both on-prem users and admin users in the cloud. So actually, I think at this stage, I'll take a pause and hand over to my colleague Jonathan at Silverfort to talk you through a little bit more of the Silverfort solution and provide a live demonstration.
Perfect. Thank you, Mandeep. I think there's an echo. No, we're okay. Can you see my screen? Perfect. So I don't know who gets the reference from this movie, but one of my favorite movies growing up. Maybe if anybody can raise their hand if they get this reference, so I don't feel too old. Yeah, thanks, Mandeep. And I agree 100% with what you're saying, especially around the zero trust. A lot of people talk about zero trust as a project, and I don't agree. It's a journey, right? The project means that it has a start and an end date to it. And zero trust isn't a product, like you mentioned. Zero trust is a mindset and is a way that you work inside an organization. So that means every new employee that joins, every employee that leaves, every new asset that is onboarded must be part of this zero trust journey. So there is, if anybody tries and comes to sell you and says, plug this into your network and you'll have zero trust, I would be very, very skeptical about that. It's about how do we design our network and how do we think about authentications and our employees and our applications in a zero trust mindset. So it's very important that we talk about that. And when we talk with organizations, a lot of them say, well, I have MFA. MFA has been around for decades now, and we have MFA and everything is protected. I think we're all good. And we know that MFA helps, but at the same time, we're still seeing, and you can look at the news on any given day, that organizations are being attacked. So if we have MFA and we know that MFA is a solution to stop attacks, why are these attacks still taking place? And when we take a second look and a deeper look into it, we see that these organizations have MFA for maybe their RDP or their VPN or maybe some of their cloud applications. But at the end of the day, that's not what an attacker is using. An attacker is not going to go in RDP server by server. They're going to use command line tools. They're going to use scripts. They're going to try and be as efficient as possible to get to your network and move around and cause as much damage as possible, as quickly as possible. Because somebody once told me, Even bad guys have bosses and budgets. If they need to spend $1 million to hack your network, but they're only going to end up getting $500,000 out of it, that's not worth it for them. They're going to move on to another victim. So we need to make it as difficult as possible for them, and we need to be able to block the tools that they're using, not the ones that are easy for us to block, like VPNs or HTTPS access to SaaS applications. We need to be able to block the things that they're actually using, and those are the legacy accounts, the service accounts, file shares, command line tools. These are what attackers are actually using on a day-to-day basis. And if we think about the journey to the cloud, right, I think we all like to think that tomorrow we're going to wake up and everything is going to be in the cloud, everything is going to be on Entra ID or Azure AD, but that really isn't the case. And if it was, we'd be in a much better place from a security perspective. But in reality, most organizations have hybrid environments or on-prem, exclusively on-prem or air-gapped environment, and it's going to take many, many, many years to completely move to the cloud. And when we look at these as the big identity vendors like Microsoft, they're very focused on bringing features to the cloud environments, to your SaaS applications. And they're not really focused on what happens with our on-prem environments. But we need to understand that a hybrid environment means that the same identity, my user that I log into Office 365, for example, can log into my on-prem account. It's the same identity regardless of where it's being managed. So I need to look at identity from a holistic perspective and not look at it as in a siloed perspective as far as Active Directory and Azure AD. I need to look at them together and be able to make real-time decisions about what those identities are doing, regardless of where they're actually identifying to. And so I'll just give you 2 numbers or 3 numbers from the recent Microsoft defense report that was released, I think, 2 months ago. And we can see here the top things that are keeping security administrators awake at night. And I'll just point your attention to no MFA and legacy and unsecured protocols. These are really a lot of the things that are keeping the security administrators awake at night and that are causing them the gaps in their network as far as securing identities. And this is Microsoft's own report that came out. So it's pretty clear that there's a problem. I mean, we need to be able to solve that problem. And that's exactly what Silverfort is here to do. Silverfort is here to be able to bring those new identity protection tools that we have available from the cloud, like number matching, passwordless, MFA, all of those things, but to bring them across the entire network without having to go and deploy agents to all of my servers or recode any of my applications or do anything complicated. As Mandy mentioned, we can be very, very quick to providing a level of security and information to the customers in a very quick and easy manner. And that's what I want to show you now while we move over to the demo. But I'll just stop for a second to see if there are any questions. Maybe Sophia, you can let me know if there's any questions in the chat, because I can't see them.
I couldn't see any at the moment, Jonathan.
Okay, perfect. So we'll jump over to the demo because I know that's what everybody's excited to see. So we'll see the demo, 2 different perspectives. We'll start with the demo from the end user perspective, basically meaning what your end users will see and the different types of use cases and capabilities we can use Silverfort for. And then we'll move over more to the admin side of things, and we'll see what your SOC team and your security analysts and your security administrators can see in the level of information and auditing and visibility that they get once they're using the Silverfort product. If at any time you have any questions or you want to see something, you want to dive down into something a little bit deeper or any technical questions, please feel free to stop me and I'll try and answer all of your questions. So the first thing that I want to show you is a demo of a PowerShell session. So PowerShell, for those of you that aren't aware, is a tool that's built into every Windows server or every Windows machine now, I think. It's a tool that's used by administrators to do their jobs, right? They have to log into a machine, install a patch, restart a service, check something, run something. It's a tool that's used by every administrator across the globe, but it's also something that's used by attackers because it's a built-in Microsoft tool. It runs on Microsoft servers. You don't need to download it from the darknet or buy it or find some way to get it onto the server. It's there. It's already there, and it's a tool that can be used. So let's take a look at what happens here. So in this case, we're going to run a PowerShell script. We're going to execute the script on a remote machine. So we're jumping from one machine to the other. And when this script runs, what you can see now, I've paused the video for a second, is at the bottom right hand of the screen, we see the sign in with Microsoft button. So what we've done now is we've taken this on-premise authentication, which is a completely legacy authentication, but a standard authentication. So nothing special from the PowerShell perspective or nothing special from the actual command itself. It's a standard command that's taken place completely on-prem, and we've moved it over to a cloud authentication. So those of you that are familiar with signing into Microsoft Office 365, you'll be familiar with this action, sign in with Microsoft. And now I've moved this authentication over to Entra ID. So I can use now the power of Entra ID and conditional access. And in this case, we're going to use number matching, Microsoft's recommended way and unfishable way of MFA, to allow the user to authenticate in a very, very strong way to say, yes, I am this administrator. I am the one that tried to run this remote PowerShell command. So again, we've taken a completely on-prem to on-prem legacy authentication, moved it into Azure AD or Entra ID, run it through conditional access. So those of you that are familiar with conditional access, think of all the different resources you can pull in to make a decision in conditional access. We've run it through that funnel. And at the end of that funnel, what's come out is the decision to prompt the user for MFA. And in this case, the specific type of MFA that we're using, which is strong MFA, has been number matching. So we can bring a very, very new, strong authentication feature to an old legacy authentication. And I'll even take it one step further. I don't know if anybody has used here the new feature from Apple, which is called Passkey, but take a look at what we can do now as well. So we're running, again, another PowerShell script. Again, PowerShell is just an example of something very legacy and very on-prem, but any authentication will do. In this case, we get a pop-up again asking us, do we want to authenticate? Once the user clicks yes, we'll see what happens is that the user is actually requested to choose a different, what type of token they want. And in this case, we're using the new Apple feature called Passkey. So the user scans the barcode with their iPhone, approves it with Face ID, and once it's approved, we'll see in a second, the authentication goes through. So the user actually doesn't need to install anything on their phone. So if it's not a company phone, for example, and they're limited on what they can install on it, this just requires the use of a camera, and we are able to get in and provide this authentication. So we're taking a very, very modern type of authentication, something that came out, I think, probably less than a year ago from Apple. And we're able to bring it to something that nobody ever thought was possible before, which is an on-prem command line authentication. Any questions about these two demos? Nothing so far. Okay, perfect. So two more that I want to show you. One is more of a classic file share authentication and protection. So file shares are still something that are being used, of course, by organizations across the globe, sharing financial information, production information. It's a manufacturing company. Maybe we have design documents there that are very, very sensitive. But this is also one of the places, the first places that ransomware, a script is going to try and go in and mount as many of these file shares as possible and either delete the files, copy the files, encrypt the files, but in general cause a lot of damage. And there's no native way in Windows to protect these file shares with strong authentication. But in this case, what we're going to do, the user double clicks on the file share, again, standard file share. And what we're going to see in this case, when the user tries to open it, they get a standard push notification to their, in this case, Microsoft Authenticator. They approve it, and they're given access to here. We can see the company secrets, medical records, employee salaries, and all passwords.txt. I hope nobody is storing their passwords in a file called all passwords, God forbid. But again, in this case, we're using the Microsoft Authenticator, which we see most of our customers using, as most organizations already have it. So there's no need to re-educate your customers. There's no need to re-enroll any of the end users or buy additional licenses. You have Microsoft Authenticator. Your users are already using it to access their cloud applications. Very simply, without making any changes on their side, they'll now be able to use it to access on-prem applications or on-prem authentications as well. And the last thing that I want to show you is a recent integration that we've done with the Microsoft team, and specifically the Microsoft Defender for Identity team around risk-based authentications. So Microsoft has a product, part of the Defender for Identity, part of the Defender suite. So you have Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud, and one of the other products is Defender for Identity, which specifically looks at on-prem authentications and provides alerts in real time about different types of identity-based attacks. The problem with this is it's alerts, and I think none of us are missing additional alerts in our life. I think we have enough alerts for a lifetime. But what we need is a way to take those alerts and act upon them and provide a real-time response. So Microsoft and Silverfort have partnered in a way that Defender for Identity will be the part that provides the alerts and the detections. And Silverfort, with the integration with MDI, will provide the real-time response in case anything is detected. So let's take a look at this demo. We'll start off by looking at my user, which is currently at a low risk. So Silverfort is looking all the time, and I'll show this in a few seconds, at all of the user's authentications and building a profile. So right now we see that my user is at a low risk. And what this means is that in this case, my user can access their shared folder with no problem. You see no MFA popped up because my user is currently configured with a low risk. What we're going to do now is we're going to log on to the M365 security dashboard, and we're going to see that my user is at a high risk. So I'm going to enable MFA for this user. Again, notice that this is being done through the Microsoft dashboard. So what we've done now is we've enabled MFA for on-prem. If we refresh, we'll see that my user now has an elevated risk to a high risk. And if we take a look at why, we can see that we've received an indication from MDI indicating that this user is suspected of some type of identity-based attack. Now, the user does the same action, this time trying to access the same shared folder. But what's going to happen now is that the shared folder won't pop up until the request is approved with an MFA. In this case, we're using the Silverfort app, but we could have used the Microsoft app in the same way. So this is what we're calling risk-based authentication, and it allows the users to continue to work as long as there is no risk. But once a risk is detected, we can automatically turn on identity security features to protect that user and stop an attack from completely taking over our network. And we do this together with a Defender, as they're able to see a lot of the detections in the network, or a lot of the authentications in the network, some things that we are not able to see. So it's a great use of both products together. Any questions before I jump over to the admin side of things? I can open up the Q&A here as well, and I don't see.
There is one question, Jonathan. So from Botond, MFA bombing is a new method to bypass MFAs. How can you adopt zero trust policy in this instance?
That's a great question. So yeah, MFA bombing, for those of you that are not familiar, is basically a way, and we've seen this attack taking place many times, it's basically a way to send a lot of MFAs very, very quickly to the user. Like at 12 o'clock at night, I don't know, you're watching a movie, you're at a pub, and eventually you'll just click it because your phone is buzzing. So eventually you'll just click yes and let the attacker in. That's kind of the idea. So there's several ways to get around it. One, built into our system, we have an MFA bombing mechanism, detection and prevention mechanism, that if you get more than X number of MFA requests in a given time, we'll automatically block it. That's one way. The second way is to provide context. So in these videos, these demos that I showed you, I can go back to one of the other videos. Let's go back to this one, for example. When the authentication popped up, you can see here at the bottom, this is an optional feature that we have. It says, Chuck, are you trying to access PowerShell? That's just the name of the app that we configured, but this can be any name that you want. Are you trying to access this application from this server? So this gives the user context and say, wait, this isn't the MFA that I'm doing. I'm not going to approve it because I'm getting a little bit more context here. And the best way to get around MFA bombing is to use more sophisticated MFA techniques. One of them is passkey. You cannot do MFA bombing because you need to be in front of the device actually to take a picture of the QR code. So even if you're at the pub, if you're not looking at your computer, it's not going to help. And the second way is also number matching. So number matching, you have to see the number and enter that exact 2-digit code on your phone. Again, if you're at the pub and you're not working on your computer, even if it's MFA bombing, you won't be able to approve it. So those are the ways to get around MFA bombing and other MFA hacking attacks or techniques. Great question. So now let's go over in the next few minutes and show you kind of what we see, or what the Silverfort products provides, the security admins, the SOC, and the IT team in general. So this is our main dashboard, and we'll start kind of from the left and move our way over to the right. So the first thing that we're seeing here is first of all, a detection of all the users in the system. So we're providing a very basic inventory, and we'll provide more information in a second, but how many users do I have, how many service accounts do I have, and how many privileged users. So already I know what I need to protect. The second thing, if we take one step over to the left, we're seeing which identity providers are we connected to. In organizations, we can have several identity providers. In most organizations, 99%, we're going to have Active Directory, but then we'll have some type of cloud identity provider, either Okta, or if you've read in the news in the last day, maybe not Okta, or Entra ID, ADFS, and we're able to plug into all of those identity providers. And then what you're seeing in the middle, those flying white dots, which I like to call the Star Wars effect, those are real-time authentication. So once we plug into those directories, we're able to see and read and record and analyze every single authentication that is taking place. So every time somebody opens a shared folder or unlocks their workstation or signs into their CRM or whatever it may be, we're able to see those authentications. And we build profiles and we analyze risk based on many different things, based on algorithms that we have, but also based on connections and integrations that we have with third party, like Microsoft, for example. So if Defender sees something, somebody's downloaded malware, somebody's going to a malicious website or something like that, we're able to collect that information and use it to affect a user's risk score, which will then affect their authentication. So once we do that, we can take a look down here at the bottom. We can say, okay, in my environment, I have 3 users with a critical risk, 19 high, 12 medium. And we can also see things about service accounts, which is super critical. And we'll talk about that in a second as well. But if we want to see kind of more an in-depth picture, we can go to our insights page. And here we can see 2 things. The top level, which provides information regarding our hygiene, our identity hygiene, let's call it. So if we take a look here, for example, I have 120 domain admins and a total of 365 users. Now, I'm no IT specialist, but I don't think we need 120 IT domain admins with only 365 users. So already here, I have some work to do. I have some shadow admins, which is a really bad thing. And we even have an explanation here, providing information and the correlation to the MITRE attack vector on why you should get rid of these shadow admins. We go on to other things like Kerberoasting and different exploits like log4shell and so on and so on. So this gives you information and tools and action items on how to clean up your network and position your network in a much more secure manner. And if we take a step down to the bottom half of the screen, here we can see real-time information about our users. So I can see, for example, sfadmin, one of my administrators, apparently, according to his name, has critical risk. And I can go in and investigate and see detailed information about why this user has such a high risk. We're not going to go into it right now, but we can see very detailed information, what this user has been authenticating to, where they've been authenticating from, and why Silverfort has classified this user as a high risk. And there's a few more things. We won't go into all of them. There are 2 more things that I want to touch on. One is the policies. This is how we define where we want to intervene with our authentication. So I just want to kind of walk you through at high level to show you how simple it is and how quickly we can provide value, how quick and easy it is to build one of these policies. So let's just create a new policy. Let's say I want to protect my CRM application. So this is an on-prem CRM app that I'm using, for example. I know this application is using NTLM or Kerberos. And even if you don't know that, by the way, we have ways to show you that information to make things much easier. And I want to create a static policy because every time somebody accesses CRM, I want them to get MFA because there's customer information there. So all I need to do is select a group of users. So I just start typing and I see here, okay, let's take all of my domain users, for example, but it could be any subset of users. And anytime they access my application server, for example, or anytime, let's add that, or anytime they access one of my database servers. Let's just take another example. I want to add that as well. So anytime any user that's part of this group accesses from any device to one of these 2 applications, I want them to MFA, and I want them to use the MS Authenticator in order to approve. Or you know what? I want them to be even more secure and give them the option of using FIDO tokens as well. Me as an administrator, I have complete control over this. And we even have more advanced options. For example, people should not be working on Saturday and Sunday. So maybe I only want MFA. I know attackers are coming in on the weekends when nobody's at their desk. So I only want MFA if somebody's working on the weekend. Or I don't want to drive my users crazy. So you know what? I just want MFA once an hour so that they don't kill me when we're having lunch together because I'm driving them crazy. And we can even do retrospective validation. This is something that you're all pretty familiar with from Gmail, for example, or Facebook, where you've logged in and then you get an email saying we've detected a new login from London, from a Mac device, blah, blah, blah. Was this you? So we actually have that option to do retrospective, which will help us to make the network more secure and change the risk level of your user. And once I click save, that's it. I'm now protecting my CRM applications and my databases with MFA for all of these users. I didn't need to restart any services. I didn't need to make any code changes. I didn't need to deploy any agents to this server. I didn't need to talk to the CRM vendor whatsoever. All of this was done in 5 or 6 minutes. Click save, wait for the policies to sync, and it's all good to go. So that's how we create policies. And we have recommendations of policies that we recommend for customers to do on day one. And as Mandeep mentioned, it's not about being perfect on day one. It's about incrementally improving and adding more policies as you start this journey. It never ends, because as you have more users or more applications, or you're making changes in the network, your policies will change as well. But they're pretty easy, in my opinion, to change. So that's around the human users. And the last thing I want to mention before we leave some time for questions is around service accounts. So service accounts are many times overlooked by organizations. And I'll just give a quick refresh for those of you that aren't familiar with service accounts. Service accounts are identities, so usernames and passwords, basically, that are used by applications and not by humans. So for example, an application that is used to back up systems or to run reports or to transfer files from one location to the other, those systems need credentials, they need permissions, they need identities. And a lot of times those identities, these service accounts, have been running for years and years in the organization. The IT team has no idea what's actually being done and what their permissions are and what they should be doing versus what they're actually doing. So the first thing that we're able to provide, the first piece of valuable information with Silverfort, is we're able to provide you a list of those service accounts. So first of all, know what you're dealing with. And already, customers are very happy to see, okay, now instead of looking at an Excel sheet and thinking that these are the service accounts I have, I can actually get real-time information from my network into what are the real service accounts that are actually running. So this is the first thing that we get. And now we can dive down even deeper, and I can see, okay, I have a service account that's in charge of backing up, and I can see it's running from this list of devices, which is a lot, and it's accessing this list of devices. Now, I can go to the team that's in charge of backups and say, why does this service actually need to run from both of these servers? And they'll tell me, oh, it doesn't. It only needs to run from 50.20. Perfect. So I turn it off. I click here, block access. And now what I've done is I've built a virtual fence or a digital fence around this service account that can only be used from this pre-approved list of sources to this pre-approved list of destinations. So if an attacker or a developer or somebody is trying to use this service account outside of what the business has approved, it won't be able to authenticate regardless of their permission. So they can be running with the highest level of permissions, we'll still be able to stop that and of course get alerts and so on. And this is really critical for organizations because service accounts obviously control very important parts of the business. Think about financial institutions transferring of money from one location to the other. We can't take the chance of these services not running because it has a very big impact on the organization. But by building this digital fence, we don't need to make changes. We don't need to restart any services, but we're able to limit the attack vector if someone were to able to get hold of these accounts. So that's the demo. Right on time, we wanted to leave 5 minutes for questions at the end or comments. So now the floor is yours if anybody has any questions or comments or anything else that they'd like to see. Okay, I think I'll take that as a no. And so we'll just, Sophia, if you want to share the last slide.
Okay, I've just received one question from an anonymous. Will, I assume this is relative to the Silverfort solution. So will this require lots of training in my organization? It's probably a fair question. I guess new solution system. I guess my initial observation, I guess, is one of the powerful features of Silverfort is the integration with the existing Microsoft ecosystem and it being agentless from that point of view, Jonathan. And I think time to solution is pretty rapid. And the key thing here is to provide coverage and flexibility to admins and so on to have full control very quickly to help be kind of a building block on that zero trust journey. But in terms of general training, as you guys see it over at Silverfort, what does that look like with your customers?
Yeah, so I think it doesn't require a lot. The system is pretty intuitive. I would also say that, one, we have a lot of online resources, but I think more importantly, it's finding the right partner. And I think ITC is a great partner here to be able to, the system itself is very easy to deploy, and to build the policies you saw, it's relatively easy. I think what's important is building on the knowledge of the network and understanding what are the customer's needs and translating those into policies, and also putting them in a priority list, right? We talked about this. You can't do everything on day one. So which policies do we build out first? What problems or use cases do we try and tackle on day one? And I think having a good partner that has experience and knows your network and knows your requirements is key to translating those things into technical clicks inside the network, inside the system, the Silverfort system, in order to secure your network. The system itself is relatively easy. Even in large organizations, it requires maybe, I'm talking large, like tens of thousands of people, maybe half of a person's job to manage Silverfort on a day-to-day basis. A lot of it can be automated, so it's really not that difficult. And we have quarterly trainings that we do for free for all of our customers. But I think having the right partner involved is also key.
Fully agree. We probably have time.
And I'll just call your attention to the last slide while some more questions come in. We will be at Black Hat together with ITC, so feel free to stop by and say hi and see some more demos. And if you scan the QR code, we're also having an event with Microsoft on the 5th of December next to their offices in Paddington. So feel free to register for that and come see us out there as well. So just wanted to call your attention to that. And yeah, Mandy, back over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jonathan. I think we have another question. We've got time for one more question and a final poll before we end the webinar. Why can't I go direct to Silverfort? Why involve a partner like ITC in a deployment process? I think a few reasons. I think we talked about, first of all, the very elegant solution that Jonathan demonstrated through MFA coverage into the blind spots, which is a very powerful control to help you prioritize what kind of matters to you to get you started on your journey, or perhaps reassess and reevaluate. So a partner like ITC can help you provide that context to the maturity assessment, starting with the cleanse, relating control adoption to your roadmap, and also as an MSSP. We partner with Microsoft as the Silverfort around solutions like Sentinel, Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Cloud, as well as Defender for Identity. So providing full integration of Silverfort solution with our MXDR offering, and we're already starting to work through APIs on integration with Sentinel, our SIEM solution, and so on. So it provides a real comprehensive solution for a partner like ITC, and that's where we're really proud to start offering our solutions jointly. Jonathan, if anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I agree. I completely agree. And it goes back to my first question around the training. I think a lot of the challenge is taking the business requirements and translating them. And Silverfort, we have a lot of customers across the world, and we don't have the ability, and we don't have the experience with the customer to know what their business needs are and to translate them and to prioritize them into the Silverfort system. So I think that's where a partner like ITC that has experience and has other products and knows other projects that are going on with the customer can help to prioritize and to take those business requirements and translate them into the Silverfort product.
Perfect. I think we've got time for perhaps our last poll. Just a quick reflection on the original poll. I think we had a couple of changes of mind, perhaps. We had one individual that said they've got zero trust nailed and it's working. So kudos to you guys. But look, final poll, guys. Do you feel you could benefit from implementing a low-touch MFA solution across your blind spots? We'll take a few seconds just to allow you to submit your responses. Jonathan, I think some interesting responses. I think a good place is certainly that they're thinking about it, and I think almost half saying yes. So there's real strength, I think, in the solution here. Hopefully that's food for thought. guys, thank you for your time joining the webinar. I hope you found it interesting, useful, insightful, and really giving you some practical things, pragmatic steps, things for you to think about in terms of either starting your zero trust journey with partners like ITC and Silverfort, or perhaps reassessing where you are, reevaluating, and maybe taking a slightly different direction. But for now, as we are out of time, we'll end the webinar there. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Jonathan. Thank you to our partners at Silverfort.
Thank you, everyone.
And if you do have any questions, again, hopefully see you at the networking event in Paddington, as Jonathan mentioned, or at booth 603 at Black Hat in London, or reach out to us directly anytime. So say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. That's the end of the webinar for now. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.